Hello, hello. What's going on, everyone? Bring this down a bit. Get this screen situated. Okay, perfect. Okay. Give it another minute or so for people to come in and go from there. Here we are. So my name is Zane. I want to be teaching you guys how music is written, how music is composed, all that fun stuff. So I guess just a little bit of background on me. I'm a trained composer. I've been writing music for quite a long time. I do it professionally at this point. I'm kind of looking into tech lately. That's what brings me here to MLH, but music was my first main skill, and I did quite a lot with it. It's always my dream to be a composer, so I was able to accomplish that and learned a lot of tricks and skills and all sorts of stuff along the way. So that's what I want to talk about today. With this stream, we're going to explore what it actually takes to compose in. When I say compose, I mean just any sort of song. It doesn't have to be classical music or anything fancy schmancy. We're going to look into the principles that guides the creation of any sort of music. So it doesn't matter if you're making classical, if you're making electronic, rock, folk, doesn't matter at all. These are going to be universal principles just based on human perception and the Western system of music that will essentially make anything sound good. Sounds kind of dense, but I promise you it will go pretty smoothly. So I am going to primarily be using examples of stuff that I've written just because it's a little bit safer that way. And I can manipulate the music pretty easily and show some good examples of certain concepts because I know this stuff pretty well. So let me pull some of that up. In the meantime, okay, so first thing that we're going to talk about is just learning how to compose music well. That's the big thing. This is sort of a lost art, I would say, in a large sense. Not to sound pretentious or like everything is bad nowadays, but people don't really learn the skill level to make good music fast, consistently, to a high level. Super, super important. What's at the heart of it is being able to reverse engineer your favorite songs, anything that you perceive and hold to be well written. So, for example, I'll show something that I wrote before. Oh, this is my, this is my music software, MuseScore. So here's a little thing that I wrote. You don't have to know how to read sheet music or anything of that sort. Take a little listen. Okay, so over to this part of the song. It's a little bit more of a better demonstration. Okay, I figured I would just start with that just to kind of show that I probably have some sense of what I'm talking about. So this was a little thing that I wrote. It took me like 2 minutes at max. How did I learn how to write something like this? The main approach is to reverse engineer your favorite songs that you hold to be well written. This is super, super important because honestly, I believe it's the only way to learn. It's not a secret that the best way to gain a high skill level in something is to take things that are well done and remake them yourself. Get your hands dirty with them. Try to see why exactly they work well. Everyone's heard the story of like old painters studying the works of the masters by copying every single brush stroke, thinking about why they did exactly what they did with every single decision. Or two, something maybe a little bit more relatable is a lot of people learn how to cook nowadays themselves. And a lot of people don't get a proper education, I suppose you could say, or maybe they just have no one to teach them at home how to cook. So they never had like a mentorship, or they never had a formal education. So how do they learn how to cook? A lot of people will go and follow recipes. So recipes are just high quality compositions made by someone, who knows the craft and is able to use that knowledge to create something essentially transcendent in a sense, right? Something incredibly high quality. So what do people do? They find recipes that they like, they make them, they make 10, 20, 50, 100, all sorts of different recipes over large span of time, many, many times. They cook a lot. And by doing that, just by immersing yourself in high quality creation, what it takes, what it's made of, just kind of rubs off on you viscerally. Same thing with learning music. Yeah, what's going on, Polar? Yes, we're talking about composing today. I am a professional composer, technically, so thought this would be a fun little idea. Glad to see you are interested. So I was just talking about how the way to learn composition is to reverse engineer your favorite pieces, your favorite songs, what have you. I say pieces, but it can literally be anything. I've done electronic music, classical music, rock, anything and anything that resonated with me. So I had no composition talent whatsoever before, but I reverse engineered my favorite songs, like over a few hundred of them. Every single detail, every single note of the lead melody, of the bass line, of the drums, every chord, every individual note of every chord at every moment. I would make sheet music of them. So all my favorite songs, I have custom-made sheet music that I myself did. And when you do that, you just start to learn how music works. It just kind of comes down to that. You basically have no choice if you do that. You're going to pick up a lot of quality. So I played this a little bit before. It looks like some more people are coming in. So I'll kind of give a little demonstration. Let me know if you can hear that okay too. And yes, this is MuseScore 4. It's pretty slick. It's pretty nice. But I learned how to compose stuff like that. Again, I can write that. It takes me 30 seconds to write something like that, genuinely. I can write you guys something if you want a little bit later on. But how? Because I reverse engineer my favorite songs. And I made all of those. I just picked everything apart. And that's kind of the whole, that's kind of the secret to it, I would say. At least a very, very big part. It's the most important nutrition to your composing, I would say. There's kind of two ways to do it. There's transcription like this, and then there's also like playing covers, or just immersing yourself in other people's music that you yourself play, which is what I would imagine a lot of pop musicians do, which is what a lot of there's like a lot of composers will do that too, like people that are very instrument centric. So there's a few ways to do it, but the most important thing is to get your hands dirty with high quality material. So with that, that is sort of the nourishing aspect, which is the most important. And so I teach music composition as well. And one of the worst things that I see is that people will get super, super into music theory. Now, there's nothing wrong with music theory per se. I can do theory with the best of them. I do pretty intense music theory, in fact. But what a lot of people learn as music theory is not exactly practical. It's not based in human perception and oral narrative. It's just kind of disconnected from what you would value in a piece. Like a lot of people can do absolutely bonkers music theory, but they can't write a simple melody, or they can't write a satisfying chord progression, or a complementary bass line to their lead melody, stuff like that. So, okay, perfect. So, as a safeguard against that, as a safeguard against knowledge that you haven't earned, you want to transcribe and do covers, a lot of them, with good quality music that you yourself like. It has to be music that you like primarily. It doesn't make any sense if you want to learn how to cook. If you love Italian food and you don't like Indian food, it doesn't make any sense as to why you would learn how to cook with via Indian recipes, right? Just doesn't make any sense. So ultimately, immerse yourself in high quality music. Make sure it's stuff that resonates with you, and just the fact of getting your hands viscerally dirty with it is what's important. You don't really need too much complex ideology, not ideology, but conceptualizations for quite a while. So with that, that's the best nourishment for your musicality. Your musicality is the most important thing. The quality of your ear is the most important thing. Once you do that, then you have to compose a lot. You have to compose a lot. Quantity counts. Quantity is more important than quality in the beginning. Of course, you have to be cognizant and try your best at every stage, but even professional songwriters have to write a lot. A really interesting fact about Michael Jackson's Thriller, at one point, probably still is in some respects, the best-selling album of all time. Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones originally wrote 900 songs for Thriller, only ended up with 9, I believe. So only 1% of the songs made the cut. Now, these weren't fully fleshed out, fully recorded songs, all of these 900, but they were viable ideas, viable ghosts of things that could then be developed into real songs. The reason why you want to do that is, well, as a beginner, the reason why you want to do that is the more that you compose, the more experience you have with composing, and the higher your skill level gets. Quantity is what's important. You'll see a lot of people, they get very emotionally attached to things. I totally get it, but they only write something like once every 3 months, once every 6 months. Maybe they've been working on 3 songs for 2 years, haven't finished any of them because they're just not happy with the skill level yet. Not going to get anywhere with that. The magic comes from, and the emotion comes from the end product, not from the process itself. It's kind of like a Disney movie or Disney World. Have you ever seen any of those documentaries behind the scenes? Right? Things are just moving. Things are going. People are making sure that things are hitting deadlines, that it's a very unemotive process, I would say. The end result is what actually makes the magic. So with all of that, you have to learn to write a lot as a beginner so that you can get your skill level up. And then as a professional, you write a lot because, well, the more options that you have, the more possibilities of writing something amazing that you have, the more likely you're going to write something amazing. Makes sense. I think Michael Jackson's Thriller was 900 songs. They settled upon 9. And then Taylor Swift's, what was that, 1989, I think it was. I think she demoed 150 songs and only settled upon 15. So again, only about 10% used. So very, very common. That's why Prince and Michael Jackson and all those artists have those huge vaults of music that was never released. That's just part of how it's created. Okay, so things are going to get a bit, I'm going to kind of delve into the nature of music at this point. So you can hear that I wrote this nice little thing. I'll play like a second of it again. Okay, so how did I write this exactly? It's quite the, there's so much that we could talk about that we just won't have the time for. But whenever I approach a piece, ultimately what I want to write, what I want to create is something called the melody of attention. So the melody of attention is, it's kind of like it's the melody that, it's hard to put into words at times. It's basically the melody that guides your attention, hence the name. But there's a little bit more to it than that. So when we listen to this song, let's just kind of focus on one thing. I have this lead melody here. Da ba da 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 ba da 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 da. I wrote this whole thing first because this is in the forefront of your perception throughout basically this entire thing of music. Pay attention to what is in the forefront of just your attention, the stage of attention. So you have this lower line coming in. I'll mention that in a bit, but it's primarily going to be this main line up top. So there's always one entity that is the main focus in a piece. You never have it to where there's like a million different things, 3, 4, 5 all sharing the spotlight. Never is the case. It's always one thing. That's where this melody of attention comes in. So this melody of attention is what guides your ear. It's a single thread of narrative, that your ear can attach onto so that it can make sense of what's happening in the music. So in this case, it's going to be this main melody that I wrote. Now there's sort of 2 levels to the melody of attention. There's the surface level and there's the deep level. So the surface level is what your ear is primarily guided by from moment to moment. So it's actually switches off between this lower melody and this higher one here. So it goes ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da 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 da. You can hear that. Ba da 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 ba da da ba da 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 ba da da. So it switches between these two entities. Even though they're technically separate melodies, even though they're separate lines, perceptually, they're one super entity. They're one ultimate entity, I should say. That's the surface level melody of attention. The deep level is that there is one dominant melody that takes over a section. So for here, we can hear that it's this topmost melody. So you always want to get the things. I don't want to phrase this. So knowing this, knowing that the melody of attention is so important because it is at the forefront of your perception. This is why lead vocalists and guitarists, at least what my personal theory is, this is why vocalists and lead guitarists are always the most popular people in a band. They're they're the members that people celebrate. Why? Because typically it's your vocals and your lead guitar solos that are in the perceptual foreground. So that's kind of why they garner so much special attention. Your bassists, your drummers, anyone else, usually not in the perceptual foreground. So that's why they kind of get set in the background in terms of popularity. So with all this said and done, your melody of attention, since it's such a crucial perceptual aspect of the music, a lot of people that I've met at least prefer to write them first. I'm of the same opinion. So for this one, I wrote the melody first. I wrote this topmost melody first. I had to make sure that it worked in and of itself as an entity. All to the end. And then from there, you can start to design more of the texture. Texture as in more of the layers of the song, more of the layers of the soundscape. So again, what I said before, that with the melody of attention, it's one singular thread. Your brain can only really focus on that concretely. So that's where these little parts come in. You hear this first, and then this comes in. This becomes active. So it's going to be a switch off of activity. This lower line comes in first, and then it stays inactive. So the top one comes in. This one kind of accents it below, but ultimately this top one takes over. Then again, so now this one is inactive. And the bottom one takes over. Then the top one, now it's inactive. Now the top one comes in again. So listen for this trade-off between bottom entity and top entity. Oh, oops, it was soloed. Weird new score feature. Bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. Okay, so these are pretty important perceptual principles. Well, let me explain why we do this. Again, we want our melody of attention to be written first. Super, super important that that is set in place and that that's functioning correctly. And that doesn't sound busy or weak or anything, because people's attention are going to be on it. Right? You have to make sure that it shines and that it's as high quality as you can before you work on anything else. So, you know, if I went on to write this, I'd probably add maybe some counter melodies, some percussion and such, just more elements. But I'm happy that I have this in place, because if this is in place, everything else is going to work super well. A really good example of this is if you go and listen to some of Michael Jackson's demos, like his really early demos. There's one of Billie Jean where it's just him like singing the melody and clapping and doing harmonies with his voice. No other instruments. A song has to work on this melody of attention level. Otherwise, its fundamental architecture is just weak and it's not going to be able to support itself. So that is quite a big one. If anyone has any questions throughout this, by all means, send them in the chat. I'd love to comment upon them. But your melody of attention, again, that single thread, super, super important. It's what most composers, I would say, write first, at least for little small pieces like this. So how do you learn how to write like this? How do you learn how to do this? how do you learn how to write good music in general? So we talked about that you have to take stuff that you like, have some command over the melody of attention. And to gain that command over the melody of attention, what I usually have people do is we write short 8-bar pieces. Like that usually just means it's a pretty short piece. It's a pretty short thing of music, maybe like 5-10 seconds. Like this here is a short thing of 8 bars of music. Person has to be able to write this very competently, or at least competently enough. Because if they can't write 8 good bars in and of themselves, then they most likely can't write an extended piece very well. Do you use something like a MIDI controller while composing? So funnily enough, when I first started composing for the first 2 years, I actually just composed directly in MuseScore or directly in an audio software, like directly into it without fleshing out my ideas mentally or anything. And I found out that it wasn't a very helpful practice for a couple of reasons. One is that you are constantly switching mental states. Like here, I'm trying to think up stuff. Okay, now I go into the software, which is kind of like a complete different context, and try to put things in. Now I come back, try to work it out, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't really work that well because there's a lot of subtle distraction, like continuously. The other is that with this software making sound, I kind of used it as a crutch, and I cheated myself out of training my ear to a high level. And your ear is the most important thing that you possibly have. Your musicality is your ear, essentially. The whole point, or the whole goal of becoming a developed musician, is developing your ear to a high enough level, at least in terms of your musicality, is developing your ear to a high enough level that you can start to hear deep level relationships and be able to manipulate them in a musically pleasing way, in as many ways as you want or as you desire. So if you just kind of plunk in software and get an immediate feedback that you yourself didn't really manifest viscerally, it doesn't really help build your ear. The industry secret, I guess you could say, was kind of kept in academia. So long story short, there's this composer named Nadia Boulanger. Well, she's mostly famous as she wasn't really a composer by the end of things. She is famous for teaching composition. She actually has a famous sister, Lily Boulanger, who was a famous composer in the classical sphere. So Nadia Boulanger taught all the big name composers of the 20th century. You can kind of look her up, see if you spot some names. There are some people like Quincy Jones, who wrote like Michael Jackson's material and some other pretty big pop stars. And her biggest thing, Nadia Boulanger, was that people had to sing and play what they wrote. They had to sing what they wrote. I did a little experiment so I wrote stuff for 2 years, doing the software stuff, kind of came out all right. I did an experiment where I tried to write only with a voice recorder and my singing for about 2 months. My ear developed more in those 2 months than it did in the 2 years that I was writing with software. And because my ear developed, my composition ability developed. I'm talking it like unfathomably skyrocketed. I can't even convey to you how much of an improvement it was. Completely different world. And from there, I just started writing everything with my voice, doing a voice recorder. So that's how I primarily compose today. I just do voice recordings. Of course, there's some things that you can't really compose feasibly with just your voice, like dense chords or really crazy fast leaped filled patterns. But try to use my voice where I can, and that usually works out. Helps me a lot. That's how I wrote this, for example. So knowing your melody of attention, super, super important. Again, you learn how to write good melodies by transcribing them, as in like reverse engineering them, and by writing a lot of them. And we'll kind of go into what makes for a good, well, before I go into that, so I said you have to learn how to write a good 8-bar piece first, like a good 1-section piece. You can do that with just a single melody. You don't need any accompaniment whatsoever. If we just listen to this by itself, it'll work. Completely supports itself. Your melody of attention is really what everything else, it's what the entire song's narrative rests upon. So just with a single melody too, you can actually establish different sections of your song. You can establish different contexts just with one melody. A lot of people don't realize this, but because like other instruments will usually change once you go to a different section, once you go to a new part of a song. Usually like instruments will change what they're playing. Maybe you'll have elements come in, drop out. Just this one melody though is all that you need. So if I were to sing a song like let's do My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, royalty free, you can hear that there's a distinct change in section. If I go what was it? Ba da 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 ba 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 da 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 ba ba ba. Still on the same. Ba da 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 ba da 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 da. Here comes the change. Ba da ba da 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 da. So it's contrast in that fundamental singular thread of attention of a melody that gives you different section changes. That's why it's so important to be able to write a good melody in love itself, as I said before, because everything else is dependent upon that. So crucial. Okay, so now let's kind of break down writing a single melody even more. What goes into writing a high quality melody? There actually is some, I don't know if you'd call it science, but there are some even more fundamental principles than this stuff. So when it comes to music as a whole, I mean, all of this applies to music as a whole, but when it comes to all your melodies and everything extended from that, very important concept to know called the coordination principle. So what the coordination principle says is that a single musical entity, which is kind of just like a melody, it has many different independent variables and characteristics to it. So this sounds kind of technical. Let me just kind of give you some examples. So if I have a melody, if I go, I don't know, ba da 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 ba 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 ba, just something like that. There's a lot of dimensions that are being played with there. One of them is pitch. You know, I can go low, ooh, all the way up to high, ooh. You know, there's that whole range of pitch. There's different possibilities within that. There's also rhythm, like rhythmic activity, like, you know, ba da 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 versus like ba ba ba, and everywhere in between. There's all sorts of stuff, honestly. There's like the timbre, which is like the unique sound of the instrument. There's the harmony and the harmonic colors, all sorts of stuff. But kind of the big thing to take away, what I want to focus on, is how those are applied, like what this means for when you write a melody. So you have all these different aspects that ultimately form together to create a melody. How is that done to create a good melody? Right? How do you use those? How do you utilize those to create something that sounds good? This is where the coordination principle comes into play. So the coordination principle basically says that all of these independent aspects of a melody, of a musical line, are going to work together to achieve a common goal. So the rhythm and the pitch and the timbre and the volume, all these sorts of things, they're all going to, at certain points, change their character in a way together so that it creates an impressionable effect. So let me kind of show you what I mean, because it kind of sounds abstract at first. But here I have a little melody. I'll play it. This has no coordination or change of detail or anything. It's going to be very homogeneous and just sound very dull and boring. Right? If you listen to that for 10 minutes straight, you'd probably lose your mind. Reason why is because things are not being coordinated. So here, I'm going to have a change in the rhythm, but just one thing changes. So again, nothing is really coordinated. You just have one arbitrary change. So things are going to sound very nice. So again, still dull. So when I point this out, there's something that starts to pop up. Coordination works between changes of coordination. How coordination essentially works is that you establish a concept, you establish a context. So you have like the initial characteristics of things, the initial values of the characteristics of things. And then from that initial context, you have a change where multiple things change at once in a way where they all reinforce the overall effects. That's what leads to richness in music. So we're going to see now as we go forward, we're going to have an initial context, and then a bunch of things are going to change to where they start to get more so that the effect starts to become more and more vivid. So that was just rhythm. Now we're going to have rhythm and the sense of song structure coordinate together. So it's not going to sound amazing, but it's technically getting better. But it's probably not going to slap you in the face with that just yet. So at least it has a definitive ending. Structure is one aspect that is super important. Beginnings, middles, and ends are sort of high intensity points of structure in anything. That's why, for example, you have to make a good first impression with people. That's why people remember climaxes in stories. That's why if you have an amazing show, but the ending is disappointing, people remember that because beginnings, middles, and ends just psychologically have a lot of emphasis to them. So you can utilize them in this coordination context. So again, we had this change in rhythm here and structure. We had a structural end, but it's still just not very vivid yet. So now we're gonna have a change of rhythm, structure, and not only articulation, but kind of interest and pitch. So now we have rhythm, structure, interest, and pitch, which this kind of leads into this. It's gonna sound a little bit better now. Okay, now we're gonna add change in articulation. So now there's 4 things coordinated. Now we're going to add a change in volume that pays off. So now there's 5 things coordinated. Again, they're all working towards the same goal. Okay, so now it's actually sounding solid. Now I'm going to add another melody that's going to coordinate with the one on top. They're both going to, so this one coordinates in and of itself. It coordinates in and of itself, but also coordinates with the surrounding context. So it's going to sound, pretty nice. Here's if I just had the bottom melody just arbitrarily take on a weird character that has nothing related to what's going on. It's going to sound kind of weird. Right? Not coordinated with the overall context. So that's why that fails. Okay, so as we heard, this is coordination taking place. You have all these individual aspects, all these individual characteristics of a single line. Well, I guess now 2, but of a single context, bring down to these 2 lines that are working together to create a strong, vivid effect. So listening here. No coordination. No coordination still. Have our first taste of it. Now we get more. Starting to sound a little bit solid. Again, a new dimension of coordination is getting added every time. Now it's a pretty respectable melody. So we added this bottom melody. Okay, even better. Now I'm going to add more accompaniment, where we're going to have this kind of cap. Remember that structural stuff is it's a point where you can really make emphasis at. So in the end here, we're going to cap it off. Could be even better though, in my opinion. If we do this, we're going to have, instead of ba ba, we're going to go ba ba. Kind of really seal it. There we go. Okay, so with that, that's a pretty strong composition. Still the same 2 measures of music that we were dealing with before, right? But with intelligent choices, you can make things that are super, super strong. So I want to show you something that is, again, something that I wrote that is absolutely drenched in coordination. In fact, let me see. What would I call that? Texture coordination, I'm pretty sure. Texture coordination. Oh, it didn't come up. Which textures? Which texture explore? I have a couple ones. This one just came to mind that I want to test out, see if it's see if it works. But like, sorry, MuseScore 4. Just taking a second. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Let's go ba 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 ba. Let's see, I need the one with the, here we go. Okay, so for example, here's something It's going to sound a little bit goofy just because of the simulated timbres, and I didn't write this to sound realistic on a piano. It's supposed to sound like nice and impressive. But you can hear that this is you can hear that that's going to sound pretty strong musically. Okay, so why does that work so well? Why is that such a strong, vivid piece of music? There's coordination at play. That's really the big thing. So there's so much to talk about here. Honestly, I could spend the rest of the video on it, just because it's just so like coordination dense. Good music has to be. But you have this melody. So again, you have to know where your melody of attention is. It's actually going to be this topmost melody. But there's this kind of effect to it. That's still the melody that you hear. Just a perceptual trick applied to it. Okay, so what's going on here exactly? So we have this rich musical texture. The melody's going along, The melody hits a high point. It's a point higher in pitch that it hasn't hit before. That's an aspect of coordination. If you hit a high point that you previously didn't in the initially established context, it's going to reach out. It's going to stand out, I should say. We have a rich harmony here. We have a break in the texture with this like flourishing chord. Because here we have like this kind of the static pattern. We have this flourishing chord here with this high point in the melody, with this colorful harmony that we didn't have before. We also have the accompaniment changes. There's just so many things, so many things. And it follows this coordination all through this. This is just focusing on this climax here. And again, too, this happens at the climax of the phrase. It ends at the ending of the first part of the phrase. Remember that middles, which you can conceive this of, or you can conceive it as an ending of this first part, is structural. So there's so many things that go into something like this to give a rich effect. It's not always conscious, though. Again, that's why transcribing is so important, because there's so many things like reverse engineering music that you like. There's so many things that go into writing a well-written piece of music. You can't learn them all consciously. It's just impossible. There's not enough to like actively study. There's too many things. So diving into well-written music and just getting your hands dirty with it and just trying to write based off of that, it is the only way you can go on to write with like really intense coordination like this. Like for this, again, I didn't plan it out. I just kind of sang a melody, realized there was a good point, kind of from the start that there would be this nice point of changing the texture, blah, 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 blah. Everything kind of comes from there. So, those are kind of the two big things I would say when you're composing. You have to know your melody of attention, and you have to work coordination not only in a melody in and of itself, but also between the accompaniment and what's happening in the lead melody, all that fun stuff. So, yeah, obviously this is a little bit technical. Maybe not necessarily in terms of understanding, I would say, but this is definitely not a songwriting 101 class in terms of, I don't know, just in terms of how most people do it, I suppose. But this stuff is so fundamental, and it's at the heart of literally every music that you could possibly listen to. Mozart works this way. Taylor Swift works this way. Daft Punk, your favorite video game music, all of that works this way. If you can unlock this stuff, you can learn these basic fundamentals, and you can go on to write basically anything. So, any questions or anything so far from the chat? I'm just curious. Feel free to send them in, guys. Okay. So, with this, one final aspect I'll talk about is harmony. So harmony is a huge, huge subject. Again, it's one of those things that people go really crazy with music theory on, but just that ultimately doesn't really help them. I'll kind of show you what I mean. Let me see. Okay. So if we go to which texture, well, we have about 20 minutes left. Either I could talk a little bit, maybe I can talk a little bit about harmony, and then we can apply everything that we learned today to write a basic song. Yeah, we'll just work off here. So how harmony works, essentially, and what harmony is like the colors of your music, in a sense. So if I do something like this, hope that is audible. Let me see. Not coming across very strongly in here. Weird. I think the audio driver is not working. Let's do this. MuseScore. Open up a new instance. So, how important would you say good vibes are when compared to stricter music theory? So, here's kind of the thing on music theory. There's good theory and there's bad theory. Good theory is about human perception, like what you actually perceive. If you base everything off of that, then you're perfectly good to go. Bad theory is it's a few different things. One of it is that it's like a very small slice of principles of how certain styles of music work. Like if you go to college curriculums, if you look at like institutions in terms of their music composition, music theory curriculums, a lot of them will just focus on how to write classical music in like a very slim time period. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. There are good things to follow if you want to imitate that style of music, but it's not giving you the full picture of how things actually work. And it is kind of put forward to people as in these are the things that you have to learn about music, or at least kind of implicitly, because that's what they, if you're taking a music theory class, for example, you'd think you'd be learning about the fundamentals of music theory. Often you're not. It's stuff like this that's actually important. So there's kind of two pathways that your music theory can go. You can do the perceptual stuff, or you can do the kind of misguided theory. Well, that's not even necessarily a big problem in and of itself, the stylistic focusing. It's that it also is so far removed from its source that people just do a lot of things because they've just been done, but they don't understand why those things are done. So you have these concepts that only exist like in and of themselves without any thought as to how they contribute to musical quality as a whole in the grand scheme of things. And people will take that super, super far. Like there are basically every single music theory YouTuber that I watch absolutely drives me insane because they just reinforce such bad insights and habits and conceptualizations. Everyone that I teach composition to, I tell them like you're so much better off not watching anything or reading anything on music theory. If you really want to learn, the thing to do is to transcribe, because the music itself doesn't have any false principles. It doesn't have any misconceptions. It doesn't have any, far removed concepts that ultimately lost their meaning because they lost they kind of lost the reason why they were put in place in the first place, stuff like that. So ultimately, when it comes to good vibes, that's the most important thing. Ultimately, does it sound good? That's really what it comes down to. If it doesn't, you have to have the skill to ascertain why and how to most properly fix it for the given piece of music. A lot of people don't have that skill, sadly. Fortunately, at least not to a very high level. So, covered some pretty intense ground here today, which is kind of cool. Again, not that this is like super, super complex stuff to understand on the surface, but to actually get a good grip on things like the melody of attention, coordination, being able to utilize them throughout a piece of music takes a lot of practice, a lot, and good guidance, making sure that you don't fall into common pitfalls like the crazy music theory guys out there, things of that nature. So with 15 minutes left, I guess we can go on to write a piece of music. If people in the chat, maybe this would be fun. Why don't you guys send me some letter names of musical notes, and I'll use those first few notes as the basis of a melody that I'll go on to write. And I'll kind of talk about harmony from there, from composing this little piece. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes. If not, I'll just kind of roll some random letters. Let me see. Uh-oh. Make sure my browser is not freaking out. So musical note random generator. Can I do that? Random note picker. B flat. Okay, we'll do B flat. And then on this website, random note picker, we'll give that a shot too. Kind of combine you guys. Okay, so we have B flat, A, F sharp, E flat. Okay, let's see. We could do B flat, A, F sharp, E flat. So let's see if I can respell things enharmonically. Ba, 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 ba. Just kind of hear how that sounds. Ba da ba da ba ba da ba 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 da ba da ba 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 ba. Kind of dark sounding. We could do that. I don't know if that's B flat specifically, but I can. Let's do ba da ba da ba. Oh no, that'd be ba da ba ba. Yeah, that's super dark. That's like a Black Sabbath sort of thing. Ba da ba ba. Okay, cool. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so on this random note picker, I had A, F sharp, E flat. I put Polar's B flat at the beginning. So ba da ba. Oh, that should be F sharp. Oops. Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, this is kind of a weird note palette. Ba da ba 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 da ba ba da da da. Okay, so yeah, this is gonna be kind of creepy music most likely. Ba ba da ba ba. Und ba da ba 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 da ba. Yeah, I would use F sharp there works. Ba da ba 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 da ba ba 1 2 ba ba 1 2 ba ba ba. Okay, so we can do that. Sounds weird. Ba da ba ba. Huh. Okay, so now we just that's funny. Okay, so we can do this. G sharp minor. Let's do this. Ba da ba. That makes sense. Ba da da ba ba da da da. Okay, so we have like this kind of dark sound to it. So let's do what do I want to have? Let's do a synth. Unless MuseScore 4 crashes. Tell me it didn't do that. Oh, weird. Didn't add it. I'll try this. So we have this. It's going to sound kind of dark again. I wonder how that would be. Oh, I don't think I can go for that crazy harmony. Probably something like this. Boom. You can do this should be delayed a little bit. Should probably be using my brain a little bit more. There we go. So we could do that. Ba, ba, ba. A little change at the end, make that nice. Kind of works. This is a certain thing going on here. It kind of makes it sound a little bit weird. Probably just get away with this too. Kind of like that. So there we kind of have a basic basis for a song. Let's try another one. Maybe that's a little bit less weird. A flat, D flat, E. Okay, that is still weird. Wait, ba 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 ba. Guess not. Boo doo doo, boo 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 boo. We could do that. Like D flat minor, we would do. We'd respell this as a F double flat, make it a D flat minor, just put it in D flat minor triad. Saying a lot of weird stuff right now. We can just use this for now. Yeah. Ba da 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 ba da ba ba. We do that. So here we have D flat or A flat, B flat. I have E here, but I'm gonna respell it to this. Boo doo doo, boo doo doo, boo doo 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 doo. Boo doo 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 doo. Boo doo doo doo. Oh, 1, 2. Boo doo boo boo. There we go. So we have One, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, boo doo boo boo. Boo doo doo doo, boo doo boo doo. Do that. Boo doo boo boo. Ba da ba ba. 1, 2, 3, doo doo doo. 1, 2, 3, doo doo. 1, 2, 1, 2, doo 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 doo. So you can see, like, you have to write fast, like fast. Okay, so we could do that. Ba da 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 da. Ba da ba ba da 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 da. You can see I have my melody of attention. Boom. And now for your harmony, what I haven't talked about. Harmony is really so a single melody implies harmony in and of itself, but there's actually different ways that you can harmonize a melody. Um, like if I were to hear this melody right now, you might hear the harmony differently than I hear from it because there's nothing else like clarifying the exact harmonic nature of what's being put to this. Again, it sounds a little bit technical, but for anyone else watching that is not familiar with music, just kind of bear with me. I promise this will just be sounding nice in just a second. Mm-hmm. It's kind of straight, kind of lame, but ba ba. This. Mm, mm. Yeah, it's that melody of attention. This bass line's going to take over. So now I can just loop it if I wanted to. Okay. So now let's add some chords. So the bass line is already implying harmony. That's part of the bass line's job, is that it gives you, it starts to clarify the harmony. So now I can do this. It's a little bit. Okay, so now we'll have some additional color here. So if we go, harmony can be worked out a little bit better, but kind of works for what it is. Me and Jacob Collier, he makes me a little bit angry at times, just some of the stuff he says. Because again, a lot of these YouTuber guys, he's really good at what he does. Don't get me wrong, like that's pretty obvious. I don't really like his original compositions though. I don't think they just like sound good at the end of the day. I like his arrangements of other people's songs. Like he did some Stevie Wonder ones that I really liked. Those were nice because they kind of kept him grounded. Like they didn't let his stuff get just like too weird. But he gets people into weird theory at times before they can write really good melodies and like fundamentally solid harmonic progressions, I would say. So sometimes people can get off the deep end with that, but he's a nice guy. It seems like definitely makes good content. So let's say this. I want to make that a little jazzier. So that's kind of how it goes together with writing a song. It's probably a little bit intense, but you can see we have a melody of attention. We have coordination at play, just with harmony and such occurring at crucial points. Like we have this pretty colorful note at the end here. I don't know. Ultimately, I hope this was insightful. I am going to bring this to a close in a second because we are at the end of this stream. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. And from there, I hope you learned some good stuff about music. So with that, have a good rest of your night.